but we're here anyway. All right, how's everyone? That was a pig next to an AND gate. It happens sometimes. Actually, the research that I've been doing for most of my life is a system called the cell matrix, but it was originally called the pig, and we got lots of mileage out of that, so pigs are always a thing. It was the processing integrated grid, but we came up with the name pig first and then figured out an acronym that would make it fit. And the first paper on the subject was called Pigs in a Nutshell. All right, any PA3 questions? So we're going to do an open lab tomorrow. And if you want to come in and work more on PA3, you can do that. But also, if you have not started PA3, if you're kind of stuck on how to get going with this, you can come into lab and I'll make some specific suggestions again on you know, things to write and develop to start, you know, getting yourself some code that you can build on. And if you want to get a start on that tomorrow in Open Lab, that's definitely an opportunity. So that's available. The other thing is today we're going to go through, you know, setting up a virtual box, putting in Eclipse, Swing, Window Builder, getting all that stuff going. And so if you play along while we're doing this today, you might be all set after that. You might already be all set. But if you're not and you can't, right, you can come into lab tomorrow and we can go through setting some of this stuff up on your machine. So different things we can do there. But same as last week, no lecture on new material tomorrow. So any questions before we get into all of that? All right, so let's look at setting up an environment for what we're going to do in the remainder of the course, which is going to be working with some larger packages, Swing, and using Window Builder to help us build things using Swing and so on. If you already have a Linux environment and you're comfortable with it, you can go ahead and try installing Eclipse on there. If you already have Eclipse, you're probably already good to go. But if not, you can try installing Eclipse in your current environment. The setup we're going to have is a little finicky sometimes. And it changes, right? Because everything keeps updating over time and so on. So one thing you can do for sure is you can set up a virtual environment and do all of this work in that environment. So in the beginning of 224, we talked about you know, using VirtualBox to create a Linux environment inside another system. So if you're running Windows, for example, you definitely want to do that. But even if you're running Linux, you can make a virtual Linux environment inside Linux and use that to do your work. And it's a nice way to kind of sandbox your environment so that, you know, if, for example, you have one version of Java that you're already running, but you need a different version to make something work, right? You can do it in this virtual environment. And that works pretty well. So let's go through a start to finish example of this. So and as I told the morning class, we're doing this basically without a safety net. So a few things went wrong this morning. I did this yesterday. I did it again this morning before school started. And I think I have this working, but we'll see. So we're going to make a new machine. I'm going to call it CSE223B. And this is going to be Linux, and the version is just going to be Ubuntu 64-bit. And I'm going to give myself lots of memory. I like having at least 4 meg of memory, or 4 gig of memory. Yeah, have at least 4 meg of memory, but preferably 4 gig. And then everything else, I'm just going to click through the defaults. and let it go ahead and create this. Yeah, all 4 meg. All right, and now I'm going to say start. And the first time you do this, you have the option of specifying a startup disk. If you miss this option, you can go back and do this again, but it's tricky, and usually it's quickest just to delete the thing and start over again. But we're going to catch it this time. So I'm going to go with Xubuntu 1804. It's small footprint. It doesn't really get in your way. You can use 20 if you want. You can use, Ubuntu or Kubuntu or whatever you like. I'm using Xubuntu 1804 just because I happen to have the ISO for that. All right, where are you lost? So far we're just pointing and clicking. What's the first step? Run VirtualBox. So if you're on Linux, right, you can do your application finder and put in VirtualBox and click on that. And you can download it. If you're on Windows, you can download it. And there's a video from September in the beginning of 224 where I talk specifically about downloading and installing and configuring VirtualBox. And this will give you your own Linux environment. So we're going to be using Eclipse. We can't use Eclipse on the server, right? So you have to do this in your own Linux setup. And if you don't have a Linux machine, you can run a virtual machine and install Linux on that. So run VirtualBox. It'll give you this window. Say new. Follow those prompts, right? Give it a name. Select Linux, Ubuntu 64-bit. Give yourself a lot of memory on the slider. Click through, and it will ask you for a start disk. So download the ISO file for Xubuntu 18.04. So Google searches are your friend, right? Find the ISO file, specify that, and that gets you to this point that we're at now. And again, open lab tomorrow. You can come in and we can go through this during lab time if anybody wants to. So you can try it out to see if it's going to work. I'm just going to go ahead and install. This takes a few minutes, but it's not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and click through the defaults. Yeah, why not? All right, so now it's going to hang out. It's going to do its thing. So this is giving me a complete Linux system. Okay, oh, it's not going to do its thing. It's still going to ask me questions. This is going to give me a complete Linux system. Give yourself a name that you can remember. Give yourself a password that you'll remember, because you'll need it for doing like sudo and stuff. I'm going to say login automatically though. Except it's not going to let me. Okay, well, it's not going to let me. That's fine. Or maybe it's frozen. Yeah, I use password equals password, but I always forget it. Okay, I am locked up here. Go back and, if you're not sure, go back and check that video from fall quarter. It's posted. There should be a link to it in the video index, and it goes through just this part of setting up a Linux environment from beginning to end, and it goes through it more slowly. And it should get you on the air. But it doesn't cover what to do when your installation freezes, like mine has apparently frozen. And I'm wondering if this is a Zoom interaction or what. If you have a Linux environment already, then you are probably good to go with Eclipse. But if you don't have a Linux environment, if you're running Windows, for example, then you want to virtualize Linux. I don't know if you can use windowbuilder without Eclipse, but you can, do Eclipse in the VirtualBox if you don't want to. Muddle up your actual environment. Alright, I'm going to close this down. I'm going to try this one more time. So let's go with Linux, Ubuntu 64-bit, ton of memory. I'll delete this one. I'll go ahead and start this one. And we'll go with Xubuntu and start that up. Yeah, WQing in Notepad is always pretty righteous. Alright, we'll go ahead and install. We can actually do this with just try Xubuntu, but we'll try this one more time. So I'm going to skip the updates this time. And erase the disk. Make sure when you do this that you're actually in your virtual machine and not on your actual physical machine, because you don't want to like wipe out your hard drive. Still in Los Angeles. We'll log in automatically. Hey, we made progress. Alright, so this is doing its thing. So, so once this is done, I'm going to install Eclipse. I'm going to install Eclipse from the website instead of doing sudo apt install or using the software tool inside Ubuntu. I'm just going to go to the website, download it. It's going to give me a gzipped tar file. You untar that, run the installer, and that installs Eclipse for you, drops an icon on your desktop, and you're good to go. So that will give us Eclipse, and Eclipse will let us write Java code, compile it, run it, see the output of it, and so on and so forth. And then we're going to install Swing, which is a package of windowing tools, and then we're going to install windowbuilder, which helps us write Swing. And then we should be all set, and that'll be the environment we're going to want to use for PA4 and PA5. So Eclipse, you know, it's an integrated development environment. It's one tool that lets us edit, lets us look at our code, lets us compile, check syntax, put code together with other pieces of code, control packages, change our build path, all that stuff inside one tool. The goal behind IDEs is supposed to be to make you more efficient, and to some degree this works. But the more efficient something makes you, the less opportunity you have for learning the thing underneath, right? So if you drive an automatic transmission, you don't learn how to use a stick shift, right? And if you have an automatic, we don't need to know how to use a clutch and how to use a shift lever, right? The machine is taking care of that for us. But if our goal was to learn to drive a stick shift, you wouldn't want to use an automatic, right? So if your goal is to learn how to write Java code, you don't want to use a tool that's writing Java code for you. Okay, so this is why I've told people to stay away from IDEs up to this point. But going forward, we're going to be working with larger packages, and I don't want to spend our time learning how to you know, drive the low-level aspects of these packages. We want to use them to do other things. So here we do want some code completion and stuff like that. So yeah, finally we get to use IDEs. I'm using the latest version of Eclipse, and once this thing finishes, which is probably going to be pretty soon, I think, we'll go ahead and download Eclipse. That's a pretty cool thought, actually, like driving with the engine sitting right next to you. Actually, with the engine like sitting in your lap. That might be like assembly language. Actually, assembly language would be like when you're under the hood and you're you know, manually opening the valves and all that kind of stuff. Anything is an IDE if you set it up right. Well, that's probably true. Yeah, programming used to be wiring things up. Yep, exactly. All right, installation is complete. We're going to say restart now. It's not going to restart until I hit the enter key. So there's this little message down here. Remove the CD and press enter. If you don't do that, you'll come back after dinner. It's still sitting here. So hit the enter key. That will reboot. I'm going to close this thing back here. Alright, next thing I want to do is set up my window size. So if I'm inside here, no, don't upgrade. Yes, I don't want to upgrade. No, I'm not sure that I don't not want to upgrade later. Okay. So in here, I'm going to do Windows key plus P. That brings up my display option. I'm going to go just, you know, 1280 by 1024. We'll go kind of old school. We'll make this a little easier to see. And I'm not going to do my software updates, so I'll close this out. Remind me later. This is going to nag us a lot in the beginning. Alright, so let's come over here and go to web browser. And good old Firefox. And I'm just going to do Eclipse download. And make sure you're looking at eclipse.org. Go to download. Make sure you're sitting on eclipse.org. And I'm just going to take the default. So Eclipse IDE 2021-03. Download x86-64. Download again. Save the file. And say OK. We're not going to donate. And meanwhile, so this is going to save in my downloads area. So you can click on this and open that, and you can see it's under downloads. Alright, so we're done with this. Don't warn me when I'm closing my window. And I'm going to open a terminal window, so you can go through the menu selection, or you can do Control-Alt-T. And since we're going to do a few things in here, I'm going to go ahead and make my font bigger so you can see it. So I'll go to Preferences, Appearance, and I'll come in here and... Alright, so let's go into Downloads. And there's my gzipped tar file. So I'll do tar xvf and I'll put in that name of the file. This will extract the contents of that into my current directory. So now I have an eclipse-installer directory. I can go into that, and there's an executable here called eclipse-install inst. So I'll do /eclipse install. And that runs the installer. Oh, that's pretty weird. I don't know why it would do that. That's a little interesting. Alright, so this is the Eclipse installer. We're going to go with the first option, Eclipse IDE for Java developers. Okay, so click on that. Very important step. So let me make a note here. We're going to switch to version 11. Okay, don't take the default. come down here, click on this, go to JRE 11. Okay, super important. All right, we're going to leave everything else as the default, so we'll go ahead and install, accept the license agreement. This will take a little while. You get some subliminal invitations to donate. And eventually it will call itself out for being really slow. And that's okay, we'll just let it keep running. So it's a sort of, you know, linear progress bar, but not terribly. Donate. Eclipse works pretty well, so it's not horrible software. You can set it up to get rid of most of the automatic things that it does, not all of them, but most of them, and you know, leave it to actually let you write the code yourself. So there we go. The installation process is taking longer than usual, but it doesn't really tell us what to do about that. So when I try 15, Eclipse tends to break more. That's the extent of my scientific analysis. But I tried doing this a few days ago with the latest version, and Eclipse was not working very well. This download here, I clicked on this and selected JRE 11 instead of 15. That's the change that I was referring to. Alright, blinding progress all of a sudden, installing, and it is done. Alright, so we can go ahead and launch, and this will bring up Eclipse. So this is happiness when you see this. And okay, so in Eclipse, right, every project that you work on is going to be in its own directory tree, right, which hopefully you're already following. PA1, PA2, PA3, each in their own directory tree. All of those directories are sitting inside one large directory called a workspace, right? This is similar to the CSE223 submissions folder that I asked you to create. So Eclipse wants to know what that sort of main workspace is that's going to contain all your other projects. It'll recommend a default, HomeNick, Eclipse-workspace. I'm just going to take that as the default, and I'm going to check this box so it doesn't keep asking me. You can change this if you want later on, but this will just put everything starting at that directory. So we'll go ahead and say launch. And you're probably going to want JRE 11 because I don't know if I can run 15, and this thing has to run on the Linux server. Alright, so I'm going to close out the welcome window, and I'm going to close out the donate window again, and I'm going to close out the outline window. So this is our basic setup. Okay, this is what your window will usually look like. So over here is going to be a list of projects. This is going to be where we enter code, for example, and this will be where we get error messages, output from the program, and so on and so forth. So let's make a hello world. So I'm going to start off with file, new Java project. And I'm just going to call it, you know, HW for hello world. Okay, here's the next important point. Don't take the defaults when you're at this point. Okay, instead of just hitting enter or saying finish, go to next. And under next, we want to uncheck the box that says create module-info.java file. Okay, I actually don't know what that is. It's popped up in the newer versions of this, and if you don't uncheck that, your code will not work unless you do some other additional things, which we're not interested in doing, right? We just want to write Java code. So uncheck that box, and now we can say finish. And we've got a whole bunch of stuff here now, right? All of this stuff that we don't necessarily know anything about. We don't necessarily care about any of this, all right? So what we're going to do is create a class, right? Because your main program always sits inside a class. And so let's go file, new class. Cool, excellent. We're going to go through this a few times, so if you're not caught up for this round, you can catch up on the next round. So we're going to say new class. And what should we call our class? Well, you know, something unimaginative like main class. Usually I'm going to take defaults everywhere, okay? Ignore this message. We're going to keep using the default package. The one option you might want to change is this box down here, which says create a public static void main. We're going to let it do that for us, okay? So I'm going to check that box and say finish, and this is going to create a bunch of code for us. Well, not a lot of code, but you know, basically the declaration of the class and the declaration of the main method. All right, so we're going to write one line of code here. We're just going to say system.out.println hello. All right, save your work frequently. Eclipse will sometimes get in a mood and it will start crashing a lot. Right? That's not Eclipse, that's something else crashing a lot. You can save just by hitting Control S. So right now I've got a little asterisk up here. That means I have changes. Just hit a Control S, it saves it. You can do File, Save, and all that. Control S saves it. You can just start doing it like automatically every now and then. I think it always says installation process is taking longer than usual. I don't know what its benchmark is. All right, so there's you know, a one-line Java program. Let's go ahead and run it. So this green triangle will run. You can also go to run and so on. But let's just click the green triangle, and guess what? Down here it says hello. Okay, that's our console output. That's standard out, and it says terminated. Our program finished, and so it works, right? We can write Java code. So that's pretty exciting. All right, so a couple of things just to mention. You may have noticed, so this thing auto indents, which you know is kind of a nightmare if you like indenting code yourself. It's hard to turn off all of the auto indenting, but most of the other features you can disable. So for example, if you were noticing when I started typing, I started to type system, and before I finish, right, it's telling me there's a syntax error. It's underlined, it's got some quick fixes available, there's a red X over here, there's a red mark over there, right? It's all panicked and everything because it doesn't know what SYST is, right? I'm in the middle of typing the word system. When I finish that, it highlights it but still underlines it and so on. I'm going to ignore that and type a period, and now it pops up something with all the things I might type after the word system. System.out, system.in, system.console. I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to type OUT, and now there's more stuff popping up. I'm going to ignore that and hit a period. And there's a new pop-up window of the methods I might call from system out. I'm just going to type println, and there's another thing popping up. And I'm going to hit my left parenthesis, and it types a right parenthesis on me, right? This is a mess. I'm sorry. This is my opinion, right? I'm trying to type one statement. I've got two pop-up windows. I've got flashing red text. I've got a parenthesis I didn't type. But just ignore it, okay? If you just type with faith that you're typing, you know, inside VI or something like that, all this stuff goes away, okay? So println, I typed a parenthesis, I type a quote. There's a closing quote now, you know, but most of my errors went away. I can say hello again, exclamation mark. I'm going to ignore, if I take that quote and write parentheses, I've got to move over and type a semicolon, right? I'm just going to type my quote, parentheses, and my semicolon. Suddenly everything's happy, okay? Now that you can turn off, but it takes some doing, and it tends to forget when you change workspaces. Anyway, so you write your code, Control S to save it, go ahead and run, and this kind of compiles all the time. You don't have to do an extra compile step. That's part of the advantage of an IDE. So there's our output message. I don't have to convince you not to use auto-completed brackets. They've got a place. All right, so 4.5 gigahertz, 6 cores, 32K RAM. Yeah, your machine's probably underpowered for Eclipse. All right, so that's a basic setup. All right, so let's go ahead and install some more software. So let's put in Swing and Window Builder. So when you want to install software, you go to Help for some reason. Help, install new software. And you have to tell it where to get the software from. So click the drop down, take the first entry. Download Eclipse org release 2021-03. That's where we installed from. And I'll come down here to the filter text and I'll just type Swing. And it'll pop up a few options. I'll hit this checkbox to click all of those. And now I'm just going to click through, say next again. Accept the license terms, say finish. Your progress meter is down here, right? It doesn't give you any other indication that it's doing anything except for this number. So look at that if you're not sure what's going on, and it'll jump up from 49 to 50 to 80 something, and then it'll finish and say, should we restart? Yeah, go ahead and restart. Cool, YouTube video posted in chat window. I don't know if it has to restart for every plugin, or if you can
only pay for it.
If you can put in multiple plugins and then restart once. But you know, this is something to do with some like soothing music and so on. So let's install new software, and again tell it where to work from. And this time we're going to say Window Builder. And we'll click the box on the top. Once it finds it, there we go. And we'll say next, and we'll say next again. And we'll accept the license terms, which are over here now, and we'll say finish. Nice job with the video. Very helpful video. Alright, and we'll restart. Awesome. All right. In Eclipse, right, our projects are over here on the left. If our project has a little triangle next to it, it means it's open, right? You only want one open project at a time. That's really important, because if you have 2 or 3 projects open, you might be editing a file from one project but think it's from a different project. And you know, I've had people who spend hours trying to find a bug, and they keep changing their code and nothing seems to help. Well, it's because they're changing the wrong file. They're changing a file that's a part of a different project. So always stick to just one project. So I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to say close project, and then I'm going to open a new project. So let's make a new project, and we're going to call this Fabulous GUI Test. And I'm not going to hit enter or finish. I'm going to say next, and I'm going to uncheck this box, and then I'm going to say finish. So here's our Fabulous GUI test. All right, so let's make a GUI. Okay, this is really, really straightforward, except if Eclipse crashes. We'll see. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to say New, but instead of saying Class, I'm going to come down to Other. I'm going to go down to Window Builder, click on it to expand it. I'm going to go down to Swing Designer, click on that to expand it. We're going to do JFrame. Okay, so a JFrame is sort of an outer container for a graphical display element. So it's a box with, you know, the plus and the X in the corner and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to make a JFrame. I'm going to say next. We've got to give it a name. I'll just call it my mainframe. Going to leave the default package despite the warnings, right? And we're just going to say finish. Now at this point we've got a lot more code generated for us. All of this stuff got written. And if we run this, guess what? It pops up a little window. And we can move it around, and we can resize it, and so on and so forth. and it's running because we see this red button down here which says it's running. Now I can hit this to terminate the program, or I can close my window the usual way, hit the X button, and that'll close it. It says terminated, my program's done. Let's see, my virtual vbox just went into little screen mode. You could try F11 to see if that goes full screen. Otherwise, try something like view on the menu bar, and you can get into different modes. I don't quite understand the difference between, you know, scaled mode and adjust window size and all of that, but some combination of those should get you happiness. All right, we don't need to understand most of this, especially for now, right? But just to give you a basic idea, so we're importing a bunch of classes. There's a little plus sign here, so you can collapse, you know, all of your import statements. If you don't want to see these on your display, you can reduce them down to just one line. So it's importing all of this different stuff from these different packages. This is for PA4. PA3 is not a GUI. So we're looking ahead. All right, so we're importing some things. We're defining our class, which is my mainframe, and here's the thing we were talking about yesterday. Class my mainframe extends JFrame. So everything that's in a JFrame is going to be part of a my mainframe class, right? But we can also make some new things. So here's our static method, our public static void main as usual. This is using something called a runnable. We'll talk about this later on in the course, but this has to do with threading. Basically, when you want to make a GUI, you make a separate thread for your main program, a separate thread for managing mouse clicks and window movements and so on and so forth. We're not going to worry about that for now. Here's where we construct the my mainframe. So we just call the constructor, and we say frame.setVisible true. Right? Now frame is a my mainframe. That's this class here. There's no method in here called setVisible, right? But setVisible is part of a JFrame. We inherited that from the JFrame class when we said we're extending a JFrame. So this makes the frame visible so we can see it. And then the constructor does a number of things. So it says, you know, the default close operation is to exit. So when you hit an X on the window to close the window, this will cause the whole program to exit. This sets the size of the window, so X and Y location, and then length and height. And this creates another object called a JPanel, which is a thing inside a frame that we can put buttons and other widgets on. This controls the border. This is how the elements are being arranged relative to one another, and so on and so forth. These are all methods that you know, exist inside the JFrame class. All right. Now we can do some tinkering of this, right? I can change this to be 150, and I can change this to be 30. And if I run this, I get a really skinny, teeny, tiny window. All right, so that's the basic setup. Now, if we want to do things like you know, make a frame that has a button on it and have it so that when we click on the button, something happens, we print a message or something like that, right? We can look into, you know, these different packages. We can look at what's called a J button and figure out how to create one, how to control its size, how to put text on it, how to link it to an action, and so on and so forth. The idea of window builder is we can do all of this visually. We can drag and drop components to create an interface sort of interactively. And this is totally standard, right? Every development environment, IntelliJ and NetBeans and, you know, old Android Studio and all this stuff all have a way to do this, where you can basically switch between looking at the source code itself and looking at a design window, which visually shows you the, you know, equivalent of that code. So here's a design window, and here's the frame, right? And in my source, if I were to change this to be, you know, a frame that's 600 high, instead, when I look in my design window, you know, I've got this big tall window over here. Are there dynamically sized window options? Sure, definitely. You can change all of this stuff through code or through user interaction, which triggers code. So let's put a button on here, and you know, I can change the size of this. Maybe I don't want it to be this tall, so I'm going to shrink this down. Yep, that's not what I want. There we go. Alright, so I just made my window smaller. Well, if I switch back to my source tab, right, you can see the dimensions on my window have changed in this code call. So the source code and the design are linked to each other. And mostly when we're dealing with the graphical elements, we're going to do it in this window. If you do it in the code, that can work, but if you do it wrong, you can confuse the system that makes this view for you. There's a way to get the resolution of the screen and then set the size of the window based on that. Yep, that's definitely true. Alright, so let's put a button in here. Oh good, project. So I'm gonna put down what's called a layout manager, something which controls where things are placed. And we're going to go with the most rudimentary way of making a window, which is no layout manager. So I'm going to click here where it says absolute. And I'm going to come in here and just left click. And what this is doing is basically telling the system, hey, wherever I place a component, that's where I want the component to be. So if I take a button, for example, and click on this and come in here and drop it right there, that's where it's going to sit. If you use other window managers, they're going to get moved around for you, right? And if you want to make things like, you know, a widget that works on different size displays or that lets you resize the window and so on, you want a window manager. But for what I'm doing here, I'm just going to say do an absolute layout. And you notice it highlighted the word new button. It's going to let me type a title here, so I'm going to, you know, say click this. And so now my button has some text on it. And if I run this, I'll say always save before launching, so it doesn't ask me that. So if I run this, there's my window, and it's got a button on it. Alright, if we want that button to actually do something, pretty easy to do. Come in here, just double click on the window, and it'll take me back into my source code. It's written some code to process a click, and I'm just going to add a statement down here which says say hello. Alright, so I'm going to save that and run that. And there's our window again, but this time when I click it, watch what happens down here in the console area. It says hello. Okay, so this is like a hello world for GUIs. And we're going to go through all of this again, you know, on Friday and next week. We'll go through this a bunch of times and look at a bunch of different aspects of this. I'm just trying to give you sort of a quick 101 overview of this. And hit the idea that basically we're going to just drag and drop things into here, right? If we want a text field, we can drop one there. If we want a radio button, we can drop one right here, right? And then when we run this code, those widgets are part of our display, right? And there's a text area where we can type, and here's a button we can click or unclick, and so on. Alright, and this gets fun. This is like instant gratification. Once you get through this initial learning curve, which is really no more than what I've shown you so far, you can start making things that, you know, the user can interact with and display graphical elements and so on and so forth. Alright, so let's do one more thing. Let's go back into our terminal window, and let's go back to our home directory. So I've got this Eclipse workspace directory. And if we look in there, you can see I've got two files, the Hello World directory and the Fabulous GUI test directory. So I'm going to go into Fabulous GUI test. I'm going to go into Hello World. And there's a bin directory and a source directory. If we look in the source directory, that's where the Java file is. If we look into the bin directory, that's where the class file is. So I can go into bin and I can say Java main class, and it tells me I don't have a Java runtime environment. Alright, so Java runs inside Eclipse, but it won't run from the command line by default. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it, and this is going to install a runtime environment for me. So it'll tell you what it's going to do, and I'll say yes. So I'm doing default JRE, that's the Java runtime environment. Oh, nice. Check yes and no. You get to Firefox from the desktop by going up here on the little mouse icon, go to web browser. All right, so we've got presumably, you know, a Java environment now. So if I say Java main class, it says hello again, right? So we can run our Java code. And if I go into Fabulous GUI test and I go into the bin area, right, there's my mainframe class. I can run my mainframe class, and there's our GUI. And if I click on this, it says hello. So we're developing this code inside Eclipse, right? But we can run it outside of Eclipse. And ultimately, the code that you turn in on your Git repo is going to be just a set of classes. Well, it's going to be a set of Java files, which will get compiled into classes, and I'll be running it outside of Eclipse. If you run with a newer JRE than it was compiled with, you should be fine. If you compile with a newer JRE and run it with an older one, it'll complain. And I'm not quite clear on all of the version numbers, because I've had setups where everything was done with the same JRE, but it complained that it was like a different subversion, like 55 instead of 54 or something. So we'll figure this out as we go forward, and I'll probably post a really short, you know, PA 3.5 for like 10 points next week, just to let people make a basic hello world in Eclipse, push it into a repository, make sure that I can run it. Yeah. All right. We got 2 minutes. All right, let me just leave you with one more thing. So there's a plugin called vwrapper with no W. And vwrapper will let you do VI basically inside Eclipse. And if you go to the Git page and come down here to vwrapper stable feature, vwrapper stable update site, copy that, and then go back into Eclipse and install new software. So go to help, install new software, and this time instead of selecting a site, just paste in that thing that you copied, hit enter. Oh, that didn't work. Vrapper. Oh, sorry. Come down to the README and go to the stable update site. So copy that. And put that in. And let's see, add, and I'll call that Yahoo! Okay, I promised this worked earlier today. All right, we'll figure that out. We'll play with that next time. But anyway, you can install VWrapper and then you can do VI editing after you disable a few keyboard shortcuts like Control D and so on. So if you like using Notepad, right, you can stick with the default editor. But if you want VI, there's a way to put that in, and it works pretty well. All right, cool. I copied it again. Okay, my bad. Cool. All right, we're out of time. I will see you tomorrow or Friday. Have a good one. Enjoy the day. Thanks.